ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਪਵਨ ਸਿੰਘ। ਅੱਜ ਟੀਵੀ ASP ਤੇ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਦ ਮੈਲਟਿੰਗ ਪਾਟ ਸ਼ੋ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹਾਂ। ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਰ ਹਫਤੇ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਜੁੜੇ ਨੇ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਸੁਖਮਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਹੰਸਰਾ, ਜੋ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੋਂ ਹਰ ਬੁੱਧਵਾਰ ਇਸੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਟੀਵੀ ਚੈਨਲ ਤੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਭਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਵਿਸ਼ਾ ਰਹੇਗਾ the Sikh diaspora acting as social glue in the Western world, ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਵੈਸਟਰਨ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਦੌਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਐਂਟੀ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ਮੈਂਟ ਵੇਵ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਕਾਫੀ ਕੁਝ ਜੋ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਜੋ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੂਰੇ ਸਰਗਰਮ ਨੇ, ਔਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਰਗਰਮੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੋਲ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਦਾ ਰਹੇਗਾ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਮੱਤ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਜੋਤ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ, ਅਮਰੀਕਾ, ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੋਲ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਦਾ ਰਹੇਗਾ। ਇੰਟਰੋਡਿਊਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਸੁਖਮਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਹੰਸਰਾ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਹੰਸਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੁਆਂਢੀ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਬਲੈਕ ਲਾਈਵਸ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਰੈਵੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਫਿਰ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਦਾ ਨਿਰਮਲ ਪੰਥ ਚਲਾਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬੜੀ ਤੇਜ਼ ਰਫ਼ਤਾਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਈ। ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਕੰਪੇਅਰ ਐਂਡ ਕੰਟਰੈਸਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਦੋਂ ਬੀਤ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਅੱਜ ਵੈਸਟਰਨ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੇਵਲ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਕਾਲੇ ਮੂਲ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਔਰ ਬਾਕੀ ਵੀ ਜੋ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਚੁਕਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਰਗਰਮੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿੰਝ ਦਾ ਫੀਲ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ? ਡੂ ਯੂ ਥਿੰਕ ਇਟਸ ਰੀਅਲੀ the revolutionary times, or what comes to your mind? What do you think?
Obviously, ਮੈਂ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵਾਪਰੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਦੈਨ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਇਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ, ਉਹਨੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਵੀ ਮੰਨਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, ਮੰਨਣਾ ਪਏਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ, not for too long, maybe 5-6 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ 7 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਇਟਸ ਔਨ ਰਾਈਜ਼। ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਕਤਲ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਇਸੇ ਪਰਸਾਏ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੇਖੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਿਲਿੰਗਸ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵਾਈਟ ਸੁਪਰਮਿਸਟ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਗਿੱਲ ਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਈਟ ਸੁਪਰਮਿਸਟ ਨੇ ਲਿਟਰਲੀ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਤਲ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਹੀ ਡਜ਼ਨਟ ਬਿਲੋਂਗ ਟੂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਆ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ, ਵਾਈਟ ਸੁਪਰਮਿਸਟ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੇ ਜਿਹਦਾ ਵਿਗੜਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹ ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈ ਆ। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਦੀਆਂ ਹੋਰ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਇਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚਿਹਰਾ ਮੋਹਰਾ, ਬਦਸੂਰਤ ਚਿਹਰਾ ਮੋਹਰਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਇਆ। ਡੈਫੀਨੇਟਲੀ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਚਿੰਤਾ ਦਾ ਵਿਸ਼ਾ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਫੋਰਸਿਸ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤਾਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਿੱਟੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ, ਗੋਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ, ਕਾਕੇਸ਼ੀਅਨਸ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਆਪਣੀ ਪਾਵਰ ਨੂੰ ਓਵਰ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਕੋਈ ਘਟਨਾ ਵਾਪਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਧਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਲਿੰਕ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆਂ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਇਤਾਦਕ ਦੀ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਗਲੂ ਫਰੇਜ਼ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦਾ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਕਮਿੰਗ ਟੂਗੈਦਰ ਟੂ ਫਾਈਟ ਦਿਸ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਸੈਲਫ ਪੈਂਡੈਮਿਕ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਦਾ ਪੈਂਡੈਮਿਕ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੁਣ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਸਿਟੀ ਹਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਇੱਕ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਡੈਮੋਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਰਿਫਾਰਮ ਕਰੋ, ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਨੇ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਦ ਕਰੋ। ਸੋ ਸਾਡੇ 62 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਟਰਲੀ ਗੋਲੀ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਢੇਰੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਦਾ ਕੇਸ ਸੀਗਾ। ਹੀ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ, ਹੀ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ, ਉਹ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਹੈਲਪ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਸੀ, ਪਰ ਅਨਫੋਰਚੂਨੇਟਲੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਗਈ ਗਨਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਦੇ ਕੁਡਨਟ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਹਿਮ, ਸੋ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਾਟ ਹਿਮ ਡੈਥ। ਸੋ ਇਹ
ਜੀ
ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੇ
ਚਲੋ
ਇਹਨਾਂ
ਇਹ
ਨੇ
ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ
ਇਸ
ਜੋ
ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਵੋਕ ਕੀਤਾ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜੋ ਚਲੋ
ਜੀ
ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਜੋ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਨਸੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤਾਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ। ਕੀ ਐਸੀਆਂ ਕੋਈ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਕਰੇਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ, ਜਾਂ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਆਪ ਹੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਜੌਬ ਬੜੀ ਸਖਤ ਹੈ?
ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿਦ ਟਾਈਮ ਇਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਆਉਣਗੀਆਂ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ RCMP ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਰਦਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਇਹ ਬੜਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਸੀ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ਾ ਖੁੱਲਿਆ। ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੀਓ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਇੱਥੇ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਰਦਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਰ ਫੋਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਟਰਲੀ ਆਈਦਰ ਕੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯੂਨੀਫਾਰਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਿਫਾਰਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਿਆ। ਵੈਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਜੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਬਲੀ ਬਿਗੇਸਟ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਫੋਰਸ ਹੋਏਗੀ ਮੈਟਰੋ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ, ਉਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚੀਫ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਾਲਾ ਆਫਿਸਰ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਬਿਗੇਸਟ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਫੋਰਸ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹ ਪੀਐਲ ਦੀ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਤੇ ਮਿਸਿਸਾਗਾ ਆਉਂਦਾ। ਇਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚੀਫ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਬਰਾਊਨ ਹੀ ਆ, ਸਾਡੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਹੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ
ਜੀ
ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ
ਫਿਰ
ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼
ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰੇ
ਬੋਰਡ ਹੈ
ਖਿਆਲ ਨਾਲ
ਉਹਦਾ
ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ
ਚੇਅਰਮੈਨ।
ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿ ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਵੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਸਿਪਾਹੀ ਦੀ ਨੌਕਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਫਸਰ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵਾਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ। ਫਿਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਨਾਲ ਰੇਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਇਟਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਬਲੀ ਮੋਰ ਸੋ ਆਫ a training issue.
It's not ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਰਿਲੈਕਟੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਨਾ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੇ ਖਾਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਧੱਕਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ, ਉਸ ਹਾਸ਼ੀਏ ਤੇ ਲਿਜਾਣ ਲਈ। ਪਰ ਅਨਫੋਰਚੂਨੇਟਲੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚਣ ਲਈ ਮਜਬੂਰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਠੀਕ ਆ, ਹੈਡ ਆਫ ਦ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਫੋਰਸ ਇਜ਼ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨ, ਬੜਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਨਾਂ ਹੈ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹ ਤਾਮਿਲ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਚੀਫ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਕਰੇਗਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿੱਕ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਸਿੱਧੀ ਗੋਲੀ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਆਫਿਸਰਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਬਲੈਕ ਨੌਜਵਾਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨੇ ਆਪ 911 ਕਾਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਫॉर ਹੈਲਪ। when police got there they thought he was a drug dealer when he wasn't, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੂਟ ਕਰਤਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਨਸੀਡੈਂਟ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਮੇਬੀ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਫਰੰਟ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਪਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਰਿਫਾਰਮ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਰਿਫਾਰਮ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਹੁਣ ਹਰ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਵੇਖ ਹੀ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਕਦਰ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
ਜੀ ਜੀ, ਮੈਂ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਖਾਸ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਤੇ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਡੈਨਿਸ ਸਿੰਘ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਡੈਨਿਸ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ TVASP।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ
ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
For those of us, because since we cannot see Dennis Singh, and he is of the Jamaican descent, he's a Black American, and he also chose to follow the Sikh faith. So it is a very interesting perspective that we're going to get to hear from him. Dennis Singh, right before you came on the air, Mr. Hansar and myself, we were discussing the role of Sikhi in the Western world and how we can use the Sikh principles to act as social glue in the sense that when Guru Nanak Pacha came with this revolutionary idea, he planted the seed of Sikhi. There was no commotion or there was no bloodshed towards the Hindus or the Muslims, which were the established religions at that time. I know we are trying to deal with a very harsh topic because we're trying to compare two different things, whereas one is faith and the other is a racial issue. But I believe we can still see some sort of parallels as we are thinking that these are revolutionary times. Citizens are woke. What is your take on it? How do you read all of this? What are your reactions after watching the news and the media?
Recently, the wider society has become aware of Sikhism through the Oak Creek situation through the police officer that was slain on duty, people are now realizing the fate, the Sikh fate. Prior to that, the American people hardly knew who Sikhs were, what were their mission, what were their goals. As a matter of fact, for the longest time, we were confused with other religions. We were looked upon as terrorists. Now, I think within the last couple of years or so, the message is getting out there, and it's getting out through, we have street preachers who are going out and reaching out to the wider society to let them understand and know, yes, we are indeed different. Yes, our religion should not be confused as terrorists, as any other form other than what it really is. So this is what I think we need to do. Education, education, and more education. It works. It's a slow process. But we just have to keep at it.
Okay, well, I appreciate your insight on that. But as far as, with the Black Lives Movement goes, we do know that, it is factual that atrocities were committed on people of color. But also at the same time, there is a peaceful protest. There's a group of people who want to peacefully protest, people who are demanding police reforms, people who are demanding the social attitudes towards any single race. But also at the same time, we're hearing cases of rioting, people just going and just killing people who are white. What do you make of it? And it's not just black people rioting. Let me reiterate that it's not just black folks rioting. You also have groups such as Antifa. You have the extreme leftists. What can a Sikh person do? Do you have to choose a side, or can you stay on your unique path and somehow try to find success and try to bring peace in this society?
It's a dilemma. It's a big problem because, again, the peaceful protesters are being confused, as you mentioned, with rioters. And this is designed to quash the Black Lives Movement. It's carefully designed plan. Mark you. Within Sikhi, we have a similar thing happening. We have the Indian nationalist group, and they confuse the issue. Acting as Sikhi, resembling Sikhi, but yet still they're destroying the momentum, destroying the things that Sikh is doing to present ourselves and present our image. It's the same thing going on with the Black Lives Movement. As far as I can see, these rioters probably are most likely are not belonging to the Black Lives Movement. As you say,
right. But how do you see the black sheep leadership taking this role? Because all of us, this was supposed to be about police reform, regardless of what the race is. This was supposed to be about police training. When the writers came in, they hijacked the movement, and now the black community is left with defending that writing is okay. Well, what do you think of that?
It can't be okay. And I'm sure majority, I would say 80, 90% of the people who are protesting peacefully are not in line or agreement with this. But it comes back to us. How do we prevent this? How can we prevent this? It calls for a strong leadership within the Black Lives Movement community. And I think we have this here.
Right.
We have our athletes, we have our leaders coming up and speaking up this, and we're seeing it happen slowly but surely.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of neat that you put that into perspective, that the leadership did fail somewhere, because this reminds me of the 1980s when the fight was all about equality based on faith. But the government changed the narrative and they turned it into a Hindu versus Sikh battle. What do you think of that? Because you're a Sikh person, but also you're a person of color. If you were to draw the comparisons, I'm sure you have studied the Sikh struggle in the 1980s, which was supposed to be about more rights for the state, more representation at the federal level, and other civil liberties, other civil rights. What do you think of it?
This is why the movement keeps on fueling, because I don't think as blacks we're getting our due share. We get up, we have to have these reforms, but I don't think us as black people are seeing any kind of action, any kind of movement toward sensible reforms. And I think the black life, the black people, us, we're tired of hearing the same thing. We will do something, something has to be done. But until we go all the way to the top and the people who are in leadership position realize that, yes, sensible reforms, how many mornings, how many times have we not got up and think, okay, the people who are in leadership position, Congress, Senate, the executive body, they're going to step forward and do it, but it's not happening. And it's not happening, I'll tell you why. Pawan, there's such a thing as we call the browning of America, and there are forces there will not let this happen. And they're fed this rhetoric, and they support it. So the slave become master, or the slave become kings. This is what has been prevented. The equality that we hope we'd see, the equality that we hope we'll find, it's timed. It's timed by systematic measures, unemployment, health problems, and until these things are addressed, again, police brutality, and until these things are addressed structurally, then we'll just keep on spinning the wheels. And I don't.
Do you think at the end of let's say at the end of the election cycle, we all know this is the year of presidential election in America. Do you think these things are still going to be relevant on the day after election, or in 2021? Do you think people are still going to be talking about these things? Do you feel like there's some sense of hijacking of the Black Lives Matter movement by leftists or by anyone else for political gains?
There possibly is, but these things are with us. I mean, in the 40s, the 20s, we were being lynched. We're still being lynched. It's a different form of lynching. So will it go away by the next election cycle? No, it will still be there. It's a gradual process.
Right.
It's a gradual process where now what I'm really happy for, Pavan, guys as old as me, we're sitting on the sideline watching the younger generation take over. I don't think they're going to let up. I don't think they're going to let up. They realize that something has to be done. And whether by electoral votes or whatever it is, it's going to be a change. And it's just encouraging to see the younger folks, and not even the younger black folks. We're seeing the entire nation rise up.
Well, that is very delightful to hear, and I'd like you to stay with us on the line while I switch my gears over to Mr. Hansara, because what is happening in Canada, there are no elections. Am I correct?
Yes, there is no elections.
Yeah, there are no elections, but this movement is still, taking its footing in Canada. What is going on? Why all of a sudden people have, risen up? Because they're, once again, go ahead.
As I said, the Black Lives Movement doesn't really means that the lives of the black people are more important than other people. In Canada, though it's a slogan for racism, in Canada, more Indigenous people were killed by police than perhaps blacks. More other minorities have been killed by police other than blacks. So therefore, even though the slogan is always Black Lives Matter, but it doesn't mean it was only for blacks. obviously, Canada has recognized it, and the Prime Minister himself has recognized it. And Canada's biggest force, RCMP, their commissioner also recognized that there is a racism within the force. So obviously, it has to be dealt at the political level. It's unfortunate that sometime you have to get on streets in order for the government to take an action. That's unfortunate. Because when I see that people are marching on the streets of Toronto or Brampton or Malton and asking for justice, I don't think they need to do that. The justice ought to happen by itself. But unfortunately, it was not happening. Therefore, I must say that nobody ever endorsed lootings or vandalism that took place in the United States during those protests. But you got to understand, if you literally walk on streets or sidewalks as a Mr. Nice Guy, and the administration, even hand over a bottle of water to you, say, keep on, raising your voice. Nobody will hear you. You have to start twisting the arms. I'm not endorsing lootings or vandalism, but you got to understand the governments, are very deaf and muted when it comes to public. So you have to be very loud for your point of view to get across to them. And that's exactly what people are doing here in Canada. And it's unfortunate that in the United States, it's election year. COVID is dealt politically. Protests are dealt politically, and therefore the results are different than it ought to happen.
Well, you mentioned something about all lives mattering. What about the businesses that got burned and minorities that got killed protecting their small businesses? I'm not sure if you're aware of the fact that most of the insurance companies do not cover riots or terrorism when it comes to filing claims. What about those lives? What do you have to say to that? Because obviously we say, this is not the 17th or the 18th century. We're more civilized. We have more knowledge at hand. But if we're going to still use the same tools that have been used for centuries to oppress the other party, is that the answer?
No, that's not the answer. I'm not saying, as I always said, that we do condemn all the lootings and vandalism, but the government must be taken into account. So all the businesses that has suffered in the hands of the protesters. I believe the government is responsible for that, even though there are people arrested, there are charged. No criminals should be spared. But at the same time, there are criminals in the government agencies, law enforcement agencies. Those also need to be held responsible for this. So, I mean,
Right.
it goes hand in hand. You cannot
But
just
I think we also need to
blame.
draw the line.
You cannot
I
just
think we also,
blame an angry man. You cannot just blame an angry man who perhaps broke the law and just say, well, that's it. He broke the window, therefore the issue has gone. The issue doesn't go. Two wrongs don't make one right.
right. But I think we need to draw the line between protesters and rioters. Like Dennis Singh and I were discussing earlier, that it's not just about protest. There are people who are coming in trying to hijack this movement. And in my mind, I have no doubt, because as more and more videos are coming in, you mentioned a couple of the hate crimes that had happened, but also from a Sikh perspective, we know people of color, black folks, have historically been marginalized, no doubt, no question. Okay, there's enough historical facts about that. But in order to make it right, do we have to punish the white people? Is that the answer?
No,
Is
that's
that
not
what's
the
going to give?
answer.
Is that what's going to give us
Uh,
equality?
being a Sikh, the Sikhs have been marginalized in India for the last 75, 80 years. And we do suffer in the hands of the administration. There's no two ways about it. And sometimes, abiding the laws and speaking up for your rights, sometimes it ends up in a deaf ear. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm not endorsing and I'm not encouraging anybody to break the law. But I also telling everybody that when there are protests that's organized, the organizers never encourage anyone to do the writing. Just like the police force says, the police laws are good, but some odd officers do take their laws in their hands and take the life. So that's where the problem is. So both of you guys are Americans, and I'm sure that in America things are different, and in Canada things are quietly different. We don't have looting or vandalism in our protests. There was once a long time ago when G20 and G8 happened in Toronto, and police force was held responsible for that according to the law. So therefore, people need to understand, if one person breaks a law on a street, he's a civil citizen. But when a law enforcement personnel who has gone through training breaks a law, that is a big problem for the society.
Right. Let me ask you for 1 second. When Guru Nanak Pasha started a new religion, he said, there is no more varna, there is no more caste system in society. But also
Yeah.
at the same time, was anybody encouraged, or was anybody not stopped from going and destroying the Hindu temples or the Muslim mosques? Because at that time, those were the two dominant cultures that were at clash with each other. Can we not play the same kind of role here?
Oh, we can, but there are many examples in Sikh history, in Guru's history, when Cheme Pasha were told not to wear the turban, he wore sali topi, and when he was told not to carry kirpan, he carried miri piri diyan do kirpana. So it's karke, that is what you call defying that order of administration, which is racist. So you got a very fine line to go by.
But I
Protests
think
are
there's a
protests.
difference. I think there's a difference between defiance and going
Protest
and
is not a
trying to
seminar.
destroy.
Protest is not a seminar, Pawan Singh, where you expect people to sit down very nicely and discuss their problem. Protests are different format of raising your voice. Getting violent and breaking things, maybe it will never be endorsed in any sense. But you got to understand, when people come to streets to protest, they're angry. So if they're angry, the administration is responsible for that anger. People saw
Once again, I said
how
we need to
police
draw the
people
line.
saw how people saw how police officer put his knee on George Floyd for 8 minutes and some 20 seconds. People saw that video, and you expect people not to get angry? They're not professionals. They're regular folks. Whoever sees it and gets angry. Just like in Malton last week, people saw a police officer, a tactical unit, actually gone through a balcony and shot a 62 years old person when the family called for medical help. People saw that video of shooting by police officers. So, and people do get angry. You got to expect that. You can't blame them for getting angry, and some of them,
And
can't control
going
their
and
anger.
murdering people that you might not agree with. Is that what you call a protest?
That
Because there's a difference.
exaggeration.
There's a difference between a protester and a rioter and a rebel. I think those are the
Eh,
three different terms that we need to differentiate between. A protester,
That's
in my knowledge, it's a protester is something that a protest is something that's done peacefully. A riot is where you might be defying and you are gone completely mad and you're no longer a protester and then you're a
why do
rebel.
why do you protest? When the system fails you, that's when you protest, don't you?
Right, right. But you still have some faith. You're not completely gone against the system that you want to completely destroy. Because what happened in 1776 was not a protest. That was a
People are
rebellion.
asking for reform. People are asking for reform, not completely dismantling. I don't agree
But then
with
you still have,
defending.
okay,
I
but the
don't.
Constitution
I don't
says
agree
that,
with defunding.
right. But then the Constitution that you still have somewhat some faith in, where you want or where you're trying to reform, it says that you have the freedom to assemble peacefully. Nowhere does it say that you have the freedom to riot and kill small business owners. Because
Yeah,
there's
what does
enough
it?
videos.
Where does it say? Where does it say that police officer can put his knee on and kill the person?
Absolutely
It doesn't
not. So
say
he's a
that in the
murderer.
Constitution.
He's a murderer, right? So he has to go to court, right?
Exactly.
And
But
that's
that's
exactly
after
what
the
happened.
protest.
And that's exactly what
That's
happened
after.
in Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's after the protest. It took many days before the other three police officers were charged.
But I mean, it's not instant karma, you know. It does. There's a process to it
Well,
because either we have
well,
no
you got
faith, and if we need to, and if we need to change that, you know, that's why we have the laws. That's why you can elect your leaders. But here's the funny thing: it all happened in cities where the mayors call themselves the progressives.
Oh, I
It
understand.
happened in
I
Atlanta.
believe
It happened
I
in
believe the whole
Minneapolis.
thing. I believe the whole thing was politicized. You listen to CNN, it's one thing. You listen to Fox, is another thing. You talk to a
Well,
Democrat, it's
absolutely. I mean,
one
the
thing.
whole world
You
is
talk to a
politicized.
Republican, it's a different thing. So
Right.
it's politicized. I already said that. It's unfortunate that it's happening in midst of election year.
But politicized, you know, this is the world that we live in. The world is extremely politicized. But I mean, from that perspective, that's why I was saying that, you know, we are Sikhs. We're living in the Western society. Where do we stand? Is there really a black and white world, or is it all gray? Are things really relative and in relation to other things?
Well, I mean, being a Sikh, we are also rebellious too. We
Absolutely,
ought to rebel. Yeah, we ought to
absolutely,
rebel.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, when you have no faith in the Constitution or the law of the land, that's when you rebel, and that's what happened in 1776. That's when they wrote the letter to the king and they said, "We're no longer your subjects," right? But if
well,
you still have some faith, if you
that
still want
that
to
is
consider yourself a citizen
that's
of the republic,
that's that's extreme to say that when you have faith in a constitution, only then you rebel. You rebel on administration failures.
well, I mean, if you're taking up arms and you're using violence, at that point you're a rebel. I know
Well,
governments
obviously,
nowadays want to just label you a terrorist. I will not go that far because I do not think you know, it equates to that. But I, like I said, you know, we need to revisit these definitions because, like you said, different media outlets will use different words to describe these things. But in my sense, I still think that protests are to be peaceful. Unless you have declared yourself a rebel, at that point you're like, okay, whatever, you know, whatever comes my way.
well, I just wish that the governments do their job properly and people are not to do the protest. They don't need to do a protest. If a police officer went and killed 62 years Azad Chaudhry last Thursday, I believe the police force should have charged the guy right there and then within 24 hours. But police hasn't done it up to now, even 10 days now. You know, and that's where the problem lies. They take their sweet time. On the other hand, when they see somebody on a street that commits a crime, there's only 24 hours window to charge them.
Right. Well, let me come back to the U.S. and let me go ahead and speak with Brother Dennis Singh. Dennis Singh, are you there?
Can I just add briefly here?
Absolutely. Go ahead, and then I'll ask you my question.
yes. You see, as a black person, I'm seeing these atrocities committed, and it's committed from way on top. And this will create a reaction, the same reaction we're seeing. We are tired of hearing the rhetoric. You cannot call people names, and when I say coming from the top, all the way from the top, and people will rebel. They're not rebelling because they want to hurt, they want to destroy their own communities, but enough is enough. And while I'm not defending what is happening by people looting, breaking, stealing, doing this, there comes a breaking point, Pavanji, and I think that's what you're seeing happening now. We have
Right.
to go all the way to the top and make sure that the people or person there is not themselves instigating a reaction for their own personal gains. We need leaders who can lead, who can bring us together, not try to divide us. And I think the masses have seen this. They've recognized it. It's not just black people who have seen this, who have recognized it. It's the entire spectrum. So that is what
Dennis
we
Singh,
need
so
to address.
do you see it as a racial issue, or do you see it as a police issue, police versus citizens? How do you see it?
It's both. It's both. It's both racial. If you look at the history of black Americans in this country, the Ku Klux Klan people, the white nationalists, and then the police in uniform. They are the same people. They take the uniform off, and then they put this dress on, the pointed hat. They're disguised.
But how many?
But
How many
the
and what percentage of that? Because obviously,
doesn't
there are a
matter.
lot of minorities in the
Doesn't
police
matter.
forces as well, right?
You know what we should be looking at? One life matters. It doesn't matter 6, 10, 15%. When you commit atrocious acts on our culture, be it white, black, or whatever, yes, it hurts deep. And that is what you're seeing out in the street there, Pavanji.
Right, right. No, absolutely, I agree with you. Life is life. It doesn't matter, just like you said it, whether white or black. But I think that this is more of a police reform issue because obviously there's enough people of color in the police force as well. I do believe they're, I'm not sure if they're proportionately represented, but people have different attitudes. When our sheriff's deputy in Houston, Sandeep Dhaliwal, was murdered, we had a different perspective then. We were saying, not all cops are bad, but why do we have a certain switch? Now, all of a sudden, we're calling for defunding the police. All of a sudden, we're talking about just getting rid of police departments altogether.
You know why, Pavan? A policeman, I'm not saying all policemen, a policeman can kill somebody right now, and tomorrow he's out of jail and bond. That hurts us. It hurts us. It was blatant murder. And
Right, absolutely. I'm not denying the fact that it was murder, but do we have to play the race card? Can we not just agree that it's a lack of training on the department side, or it's a lack of accountability? Why do we have to throw a race card in there? Because obviously we have seen other videos, of recent videos, when white people have been killed by other white cops, and we also have had instances where other people are killed by black cops or minority cops.
It comes back to what you're saying, the percentage. The news that we're getting, when a white cop kills a white person, the atrocity, the stank is not there as we're seeing it right here. It's like you're hunting these people down to take them out. And that is it's the optics here that counts, Pavan. It's the optics that count.
Well, we definitely get what gets picked up by the mainstream media, but there are some other videos out there. We'll go ahead and try to play those videos for us, because this is not going to take, it's not a matter of 30 or 45 minutes or an hour, but I think we should definitely go ahead and do more shows. But as we're running out of time, we do have to end the show promptly at 10 p.m. I truly appreciate Dennis Singh, for you to come on the line, and of course I'm always in debt to Mr. Hansara for giving me his insight and his wisdom and his perspective from a neighboring nation. I do believe that the dialogue should continue. As passionate and as involved we get with these discussions, but I think adult discourse is exactly what we need. Wouldn't you agree? How about Mr. Hansara? What do you think?
Well, I think the dialogue needs to happen more often about this issue. It is definitely, we shouldn't be only talking about when somebody's murdered. We shouldn't be only talking when something is looted or vandalized. I think a proactive approach should happen to this issue. Uh, Especially in Canada now, the discussions taking place about the mental health. When there's a mental problem, you don't need a police officer with a gun. You need a medical trained person to go help. And so our biggest mental health institution in Toronto are telling the government to remove all the police officers from the facility and put the civilian and trained people there. So discussions are happening, and I think a good will come out of it. But until then, you cannot blame an ordinary civil citizen that why is he getting angry? He's supposed to be peaceful if he wants to protest. That's just not going to happen. People do get angry when the administration, when the governments they fail, when the law enforcements they fail people.
Dennis Singh, before we close the show for the night, any last thoughts that you want to share with our viewers?
It's my fervent hope that we can take example from the Sikh community. Even though the Sikh community, we have our problems there too. The problems lie from, again, Indian nationalists camouflaging themselves, just like in the black case here. So I think until we can get to that point where we can differentiate who is the real troublemaker, who is creating the problems, then, we're just spinning wheels. But I think that time is coming. I really think so.
Right. Well, thank you so very much, viewers, for listening to our weekly show, The Melting Pot Hour. We will continue to bring more complex issues here, and we will try to discuss, and we will have more guest speakers from time to time. Until next week, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.